Most of the happiness I've known in my adult life, I can attribute to a road trip that I took when I was in my 20s. However, it wasn't the road trip I thought it was going to be. See, I had a friend who lived in the Jersey Shore year-round. He's an engineer on a job site. And to me, that meant I had a free house in the summertime. Right? So my friends and I would go down every weekend in the summer. I had my own key. He didn't care. But out of guilt, I think, well, probably guilt, we'd go down in the wintertime just to keep him company. It was either guilt or afraid he'd turn into that guy from The Shining, right? We didn't want that to happen either. So a friend of mine would pick me up a lot of Fridays, or I'd pick him up. We'd have a bag of clothes. We'd go down the shore for the weekend in the middle of the winter. He picked me up one January. We started driving. And he said, Peter, we ought to go to Boston. I said, Frank, Boston? He said, yeah. I said, why? He said, I'm a big history buff. I had known Frank a long time, and it's true, he's a big history buff. But I also knew that 3 weeks ago, excuse me, Frank and I were out together, and we met some young ladies. One of them was from Boston. She said, if you're ever in town, come visit. See, I'm pretty sure Frank was thinking more about the buff and less about the history there. But anyway, I said, why not, right? So we drove up 95. Neither of us had ever been there before. Driving up the highway, talking, having a good time, getting closer and closer and closer, watching the signs tick down. All of a sudden, we're at Boston, 10:30 at night. Neither of us had ever been there. We drove a little bit. He said, third exit I can take, I'm going to take, and then we'll find where we're going. Okay. Get off at the third exit, drive around, find a Quickie Mart. 10:45 in Boston. Smart people are home in bed. The drunks are still at the bars, right? We got the Quickie Mart to ourselves. We go into the guy and said, do you have a phone book? He said, sure. Hands us Yellow Pages. We said, no, we need a White Pages. He said, I don't have a White Pages. And Frank proceeds to tell the story how we met this girl 3 weeks ago, and her name is Carla. We're not sure how to spell her last name, but we're here to visit her. Right? So this guy's amused. We're his entertainment tonight. He says, sure. Use my phone. And he puts it up on the counter, and we dial information. And information says, and how do you spell Carla's last name? And we didn't really know, right? So the guy behind the counter was helping us. And he said, I think this is how you'd spell it up here. And lo and behold, we found her. So he said, use the phone. He was very excited the way this was going, right? He wanted to watch us crash and burn because inevitably that was what was going to happen. We came all this way for this, right? And Frank calls her up and says, hey, we're in Boston. You said to call if we got here. And she said, wow, where are you? We're at a Quickie Mart. What's the address here? The guy says the address, and she said, you're a block away from my house. Come on over, right? So we parked the car, and we went over, went in. She said, listen, it's 11 o'clock at night. I've got to work a 7 to 3 shift tomorrow. She's a nurse. She said, but let's all go out to dinner tomorrow night. Great idea, right? I climbed into a sofa bed. My friend Frank went to the guest room. Carla went to sleep in her bed. We all slept through the night. In the morning, she's getting ready for work. We were up. We were moving about, getting ready to go about. She said, have a good day. I'll meet you at 5 o'clock. We'll go to dinner somewhere here in the North End. Lots of good Italian places. Pick one. Yeah, we're going to call our friend from Worcester. She said, you mean Dorchester? No. Worcester. We passed it on the way up. She said, there's no place called Worcester around. Yeah, we saw the signs. And she said, there's no place anywhere around here called Worcester. There's Dorchester. And I said, no. W-O-R-C-E-S-T-E-R. She said, oh, Worcester. I said, no, Worcester, 3 syllables, 2 R's. And she said, as sure as my name is Carla, that's Worcester. So it's Worcester. So we called my friend from Worcester, and he said, yeah, I'll come in and wait till you meet my girlfriend. You'll love her. Okay, great. So Frank and I take our historic trip of the city. We see all the important sites like the one up by land, two up by sea steeple at the Old North Church, the USS Constitution, the bar where they filmed the Cheers staircase, right? We spent some time there that day. All went home, went out. We're having a really nice Italian dinner, the 5 of us, because Brent came in from Worcester with his girlfriend. They were great. We're having a good time. I noticed at dinner, Frank was making subtle overtures towards Carla. And I feared that Carla was making subtle overtures towards me. And this put me in a bad spot because I didn't want to offend the woman whose house I was going to be sleeping in. And I didn't want to offend the guy who was supposed to drive me home 300 miles the next morning, right? This was no win. But we went on and we had a good dinner, and the guy from Worcester went home with his wife, his girlfriend, and we waved goodbye. We walked back, we talked some. We all went to bed. I was on the sofa bed, guest room, Carla's in her room. An hour later, she tiptoes out. She thanks me for having the incentive to come up to see her. And I tell her the truth. I say, you know, it was really Frank's idea. I think Frank has designs on you. It really wasn't me. And she thanked me for my forthrightness and walked away and didn't go towards the guest room at all, but went back to bed. We drove home the next day after what was a great trip, and that tells you everything except why most of the happiness in my adult life came out of that trip. And I'll tell you why. Remember the guy from Worcester? A year and a half later, I was down here at a party in Westchester. And the guy from Worcester walked in and introduced me to his fiancée, who was not the girl who we were at dinner with that night. But she was a nice girl, and we had a good time talking, and they moved off into another room of the party. And I was sitting there, and half an hour later, the girl he was at dinner with at the party walked in the room. And as she walked in, she started to walk towards the back room, and I thought it might be important that I intervene. So I stepped up, and I said, hey, remember me? I'm the guy. We went to dinner in the North End. You don't really know me, but Mark's in the next room. And she said, oh, yeah, I know. And I said, with his fiancée. And I could tell by the look in her face she didn't know any of that part of the story. So we started talking, and we got to know each other a little bit, and we started dating. A year later, we were engaged. A year later, we were married. And 18 years later, we're still happy. That's why most of the happiness in my adult life came out of that road trip. Thank you.